Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini. As always, I'm joined by my colleague over at the Hockey Writers and fellow Maple Leaf writer, Jim Parsons. Jim, regular season hockey is finally upon us. Lots to talk about in the first three games that the Maple Leafs have been. But before we get on with the show, how are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. Trying to keep up with all the speculation, the talk, the results, and everything else that goes on with the first week of the NHL season. It's been an interesting one. Lots of scoring, lots of drama. It should be interesting, especially in Edmonton, where I'm at right now. The sky's falling. So it's been an interesting week, to say the least.
The sky is definitely falling here in Leafs Nation as well. Obviously, three games, we're going to overreact to it because that's what we normally do in this situation. But before we get on the show, we at the Hockey Writers have recently expanded our offerings with a Substack dedicated to every team, as well as a general one for each day's best articles. As a Maple Leaf fan, you don't want to miss any of the great content we produce, and our Maple Leafs Substack makes that possible. Sign up to get all of THW's Maple Leafs articles delivered directly into your inbox multiple times per week. A sign-up link can be found in the video description below. And once you do that, you are all set. You will get terrific content from our Maple Leafs team, from both Jim, myself, as well as everyone else at the Hockey Writers there. Now, let's kick off the show with, there are highs and lows, obviously, with the Maple Leafs right now. But let's kick off with the high because, this is very important. Auston Matthews, back-to-back games with a hat trick, something that hasn't been done since Alex Ovechkin did it back in 2017-18. Matthews is just the fifth player in NHL history to accomplish that feat. Reg Noble, Joe Malone, and Cy Deneni, all three of them accomplished that in 1917-18. Ovechkin did it exactly 100 years later, and then Matthews in 23-24. Jim, Matthews wanted to make a statement. He definitely made a statement with those hat tricks against the Montreal Canadiens and Minnesota Wild. Is he on a mission this year?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, he definitely looks like a different player. That's the talk coming out of the first couple of games. Now, keep in mind that they just lost to the Chicago Blackhawks 4-1, and he did not score. He had 8 shots on goal, but he didn't score. So that takes his 246 goals pace for the season down quite a tad.
183.
That's
or
right.
Around there.
Yeah, but he's still looking at like he's on a mission to score 50, probably 60. He seems to what, but it's 2 games, right? It's 3 games now, so you never really know. He could be hot, he could be cold, but he seems more motivated, and he's saying all the right things too, right? It's not just about the goals that he's scoring, and everybody else is saying, "Oh, this is kind of fun to watch," but he's like team first, team first, team first. So that's good in that he is producing. It's not hiding some of the things that we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, later in the show, which is some of the defensive issues, but if they're going to be playing that way, they need the scoring. They need Matthews, and he's got to be making the money or earning the money he's about to be making. So you're going to need him to score 50 or 60 if this is the way you're going to play hockey. So yeah, he's on a mission, but hopefully they round the whole thing together.
Yeah, I think with his game, it complements that because, he does have that two-way aspect to his game. Now, if everything else can follow through, that's going to be huge. And yeah, 6 goals in 3 games. Again, we were wondering, we always love the on-pace stat because we know it's totally accurate, even though it's not. But,
and I love it when we do it after 2 games.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So seeing that 246 goal pace is absolutely insane because you're not even going to accomplish that. But like you said, 50, 60 goals is still in the realm of possibility, possibly even 70 because, I was doing, as I wrote about Matthews, a hot start this season, he didn't score his 6th goal until his 12th game last year, and he's already got 6 in 3. So that really basically tells you, now that the fact that he's healed because he did have that wrist/hand injury at times during last season. We knew something was off where his accuracy wasn't on point. Now it seems to be back in form with his shot, whether it's on his offside, down low on the goal line. I know he's had two fantastic, deceptive goals there. He's once again rounding out to be that consistent offensive threat. Then again, we already knew he had the shot, but the playmaking, the two-way game just makes him that much more lethal. And yeah, I'm expecting a big season considering last season was quote unquote a down year where he had 40 goals. If he's still going to get past that point and beyond, it's so impressive no matter what.
Yeah, here's my question. So if we're all talking about the 6 goals in 2 games and everybody's like, oh my gosh, Matthews is on another tear. What happens if he goes another game but doesn't score? So now you've got 2 goals, 2 games where he's got 3 goals, and then 2 games where he's got no goals. Are we looking at this again differently and going, oh, what's wrong with Auston Matthews? Like we're so quick to jump on how great he is when he scores this much. But are we doing to do the same thing when he doesn't? Because it's inevitable, right? Like he's going to have these games where he gets 3. He's going to have where he gets 2. He might even have one where he gets 4. But there's also going to be games where he gets none. And so are we going to do the same thing on the highs and lows, right? That's a real question that I'm kind of curious to see as the season rolls along, because there may be no gray area with Auston Matthews, right? Like when he scores 1, no big deal. When he scores 3, it's like, wow, he's the greatest goal scorer in the league. And when he scores none, everybody's like, what the heck is wrong with Auston Matthews? Yeah. So I am very curious to see how the highs and lows and the ebbs and flows of the season go for him, because it's going to be all over the map, I think.
Of course, we're going to overreact if he goes 2 games without a goal, because why not? No, but even if he does have like a little bit of a cold spell, when he gets out of it, he gets back onto a massive hot streak, and it, doubles up from the cold streak that he had. I think I go back to the 21-22 season where he won the MVP and he got those 60 goals. They're, kind of a bit of a slow start, but he picked it up and was very consistent for 2-3 months. And, ups and downs here and there, but he was still very consistent with the goal scoring. I think we're going to see that again where, you're going to see maybe a game or 2 or 3 where he doesn't score, but he still racks up the points. And then the goals are going to kick back in.
Yeah, individually, I think he's going to have a great year no matter what really happens. Like if he goes on a run where he doesn't score a bunch, he's still going to have a really solid year individually. What I'm very kind of curious about is how that translates into the wins and losses and the points on the season. Because if they keep playing the way that they're playing, they need Auston Matthews to score 2, maybe 3 every night, right? Like that first game against Montreal, they barely won that game. They were down by 2 goals in 2 different instances in that game, and they came back and won it when they pulled the goalie really early. They played pretty well in the second game, but they got creamed in the third one. So if you don't have Auston Matthews scoring like that, how many games can you survive and stay afloat where you're not winning and getting the 2 points, because they've been letting some teams get points that they don't necessarily need to be giving away? That's the real problem, I think, right? Like, yes, Matthews could have 50, 60 by the time the season's done, and we're all going to look at that and go, what a great season for us and Matthews. But are we also looking at how that translated into wins and losses? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, you mentioned the team game too. Matthews, like he's doing whatever he can to try and win. That's his main focus. Yeah, the goals are great, but those goals eventually translate to the wins, and that's all that matters for him. And speaking of the team game and speaking of the highs, we were going to get to the lows, and we are going to talk about the defensive woes that are plaguing the Maple Leafs right now. And, I'm just going to read off some stats that really caught my eye. And this is still very early. We're going to overreact to it, but it is very glaring considering the Maple Leafs history, especially when they play down their opponents like they did against the Chicago Blackhawks. But 27 giveaways in 3 games. That is tied for the 6th most in the league. Looking at natural stat trick, they have allowed 10 goals against at 5-on-5, as well as scoring chances, goals against, or scoring chances created off or goals against created off of scoring chances. They are at 9, and they're at a 3-way tie with the Tampa Bay Lightning and Calgary Flames. There, both solid teams on paper, but are having their own issues right now. Jim, obviously, you saw the goals that Ilya Samsonov let in. Some stinkers here and there, but not entirely to blame for those close games, or like the Maple Leafs trying to use their offense to their advantage and outscore their way out of their problems. But Joseph Woll got no help from the defense in the game against the Blackhawks. What is going on with this defense right now? Because, 3 games in, that they do start off slow, but this is still a concern given their history.
Yeah, and I think this was something that everybody was aware of coming into the season, right? Like we all knew what John Klingberg was. He's not a defenseman.
Yeah.
He's like a forward playing a defenseman, right? He's going to be quarterback to power play and get you tons of points, which he's doing, but he's not really playing defense. Like you watch that game and Bedard is Bedard, but he just absolutely just burnt John Klingberg on that one play where
that inside out,
like it wasn't even. It reminded me of when Morgan Riley got burnt by Connor McDavid that one time, and everybody was memeing the whole thing, and it was like, it's so obvious that it was a struggle to keep up, right? His combination with McCabe has not been good. This is a team that was going to be lacking the defense part of their defensive core, so we knew that coming in. It was just a matter of how much of a problem was it going to be, and so far it looks like it's problematic, right? So the Maple Leafs are going to need to address this. I think Tree Living knew that he was going to need to address it. I don't know if you just go out and get a gritty physical defenseman now, if that's even enough. You're probably going to have to get yourself, a decent top 4 to play in that role that is really kind of a defense first, stay at home kind of guy that can mix with an offensive defense. Like they just don't have that shutdown guy. Like it doesn't exist on this roster. So it's a problem, right? And so the question is, can you outscore your problems? And with goal scoring up and everybody with dynamic skill and talent on every team at this point, you're going to let in a lot of goals if you can't play defense. So it's going to be an issue for sure. Just how much of an issue, don't know yet. It's still too early to tell, but it's not a great formula when you're trying to outscore all your problems.
Absolutely. And I read off, some of the team stats right there, but Klingberg and McCabe, according to Natural Stat Trick at 5-on-5, 44.94 Corsi for percentage, 16.67 goals for percentage, 1-4, 5 against, and 36.59 scoring chances for. So yeah, they're definitely getting outplayed. That is for sure. And even their expected goals for not the prettiest as well. I believe they're at still hovering around, 36, 37%. Yeah, I can't remember if I heard it. I know I heard it on TSN, but whether it was on Overdrive or it was just a segment with Frankie Corrado. Pretty sure it was the latter with Frankie. Basically that pairing, you don't know who's who yet. You basically have you're supposed to have that defensive mindset or stay at home player in Jake McCabe, and then John Klingberg, carrying the offense and jumping into the rush. That's supposed to be expected. But now you're seeing both players trying to do a little bit too much right now, and it's catching them off guard with odd man rushes, poor play, getting out of position. Because I know on that, Mackenzie Entwistle goal, both were completely lost on the back check. And even McCabe, he was late to getting into the block to block the shot, and it went through his legs, and Joseph Wall was screened by McCabe, and the puck's in the back of the net. So yeah, I think overall, not just with that pairing, but the overall pairings themselves, they needed find that attention to detail and execute better, because that's the only way they're going to win. Again, you're 3 games into the season. It's not a major detriment, but it is raising some red flags given how the Maple Leafs, like I said, played out to their opposition last year. We saw games like these against, this same different Chicago Blackhawk team, but also the Arizona Coyotes, Anaheim Ducks. Those teams are in the standings that you need to take advantage of, and it's just not there. And even all 3 goals, it was like a result of just a miscue being delayed. I don't know what was going on at that Corey Perry goal. Everyone seemed to be a little bit off guard, whether it was McCabe, going too far in, letting an open gap for Tyler Johnson, or Matthew Nyes not being quick enough to cover his man, which was Johnson as well. Everyone was off kilter, and that is a major issue if you're the Maple Leafs right now, but they got to address it right now. They got to be on point, because now these points, I know it's early in the season, but they matter no matter what. And especially in a tough Atlantic division, you got to stay on top of that and minimize the goals against.
Well, and the question becomes, how much of it is just an individual off night, and how much of it is a real problem that needs to be addressed? I'll give you an example, and I do this all the time, and I keep saying this, but the Oilers, Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci both got caught going too far into the zone, and Darnell Nurse should have known that he was the last guy in, because he saw all 4 other people in front of him, yet they let the other team go, Vancouver, a 2-on-0, and they got scored on, right? It was just a dumb play. It was a loss of where I am. I don't know what's going on around me. Yeah, and it happens, right? I don't necessarily like Darnell Nurse gets all sorts of flack, but I don't think he's a terrible defenseman. He had a
Not at
very
all.
bad misread on a very bad play that wound up being a
Mhm.
goal. So in Toronto, the question becomes how much of that is a bad read on a bad play, or how much of this is not the right mix, this is not the right player. We need to address this or find the chemistry. And when you say, well, it's only 3 games, that is true. But what Sheldon Keefe needs to do is figure out very quickly what mix and what pairing and what chemistry works. And if he can't, then you got to go to Tree Living and go, we do not have the right mix here. We need to address this because it's not getting any better. And that's what you got to decide right now if you're the coach. Like, how much of it was an off night? How much of it is chemistry? How much of it is the player mix that we have on this roster? Like, you got to figure it out, because before you know it, October's over. And you know what they say about teams that aren't in it in October, the percentage of them being into the playoffs are not very good. So you don't, Toronto's not in that concern yet, but there could be an issue if they keep getting scored on like this, or they keep having misreads and bad plays and letting all these easy goals in against them. Then you got to go, okay, well, we have a real problem that needs addressing here. And so is it the player? Is it the combination? What is it? That's what you got to figure out right now.
Yeah, and also when you get a sense of where teams are in the playoffs, I believe that cutoff is usually the mark of like the American Thanksgiving. And yeah, I do agree. I think because of what we've seen in these first 3 games, I don't think it's just like, one of those off nights for one of these players. It's been consistent and glaring each time. I go back to one example being the first Alex Newhook goal where, it's an odd man rush. Kirby Doc gives it to Slavkovsky. Slavkovsky finds Newhook for the tap in, and even against the Minnesota Wild too. A lot of miscues, a lot of like odd man rushes there. So it's not just one game; it's 3 games that has happened multiple times in this stretch. And like you said, I think Keefe needs to find a combo, or go to Brad and be like, you know what, we got to do some tinkering early on right now.
Yeah. If the mix is wrong, you need to address it right away. Because even if you figure it out and you scrape into the playoffs, you still have a chance. But you don't want to put yourself out of the picture too early, because then you're spending the rest of the season trying to catch up, and that's not a good thing. Toronto needs to be in a position where they're dictating the points, the wins and losses. Like, they're good enough, they should be good enough. That this is not a question mark for them, at the end of October or the end of November. This is like, yeah, we're in. It's just the right mix, and we need to know how far we can run in the playoffs. That's the make or break with this team. Is not, can we get in? If it's even a question of can we get in based on our defense, there's a real problem here.
Absolutely. And that's something that they need to. Like we said before, they got to address it sooner rather than later. And we talked about Keefe, how he needs to find the right combination. He didn't mince any words post game as a result of that loss. Basically saying that they were really sloppy. Turnovers were careless with the puck. And he even called out the best players where, they had to set the tone early on, and they didn't. And, this is the first time where we've seen Keefe call out his best players. I just want to get your quick thoughts on his comments and if this is something that will resonate with the team, because even Morgan Riley said that, it's obvious that they got to execute and have better structure.
Yeah, this is nothing new. Like you said, this isn't anything new for Keefe. This is a habit that he has where he calls out some of these guys. And I might have even said it last year on one of the shows. It's kind of like, you can only get away with that so many times, right? Because what happens here is these players know whether they played well or they didn't. And they also know that they're the lifeblood of the team. So when they're having a bad game, like just listen to Tavares' comments the other day after they lost to Chicago. I mean, he's well aware that if they're not going, this team's not doing anything. But you can't keep calling them out, right? Like they know they weren't good. They know they didn't score. They know they're supposed to. You don't have to keep calling it. When you do that one too many times, then it's just going to fall on deaf ears. At some point, the Stars are going to tune you out, because they know really probably more than the coach does in some instances, what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I don't like that he's doing it after game 3. It's not that he's wrong, because they didn't play well enough, right? And that's why they didn't win. But you can't keep going to that well. You can't keep calling on these guys and saying, hey, Matthews were good enough, Marnie were good enough. You just got to call out the whole team. And you got to say, hey, as a group, they still know when you call out the whole team, it was them, right? Like, they're aware. They got to be better. But you don't have to just individually point fingers at certain people, because it's just not going to work after a while, right? You might get a response out of them for the next game, but if you keep doing it, It's not going to matter. So I don't like the approach. And he has a habit of doing this. Like, it's just something that he's sort of always done. I don't know if he's got comfortable, but it's something he does. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, and he even added that we've seen this movie before in terms of, the poor execution and the play like that. But I mean, again, given how the Maple Leafs played out of their opposition, I think that, it seems like a broken record where they have these games, even for a stretch, and they still don't learn their lesson. Like, it seems like it's over and over again where they don't learn their lesson, that they need to be at their best. Because I know that Keefe said at the beginning of the season, especially against the game against Montreal where they lost last year, set the tone and be a team that, you want to be tough and be competitive against. And we're just not seeing that. We're seeing it in spurts, but we're not seeing it consistently and often as we should. I mean, you look at teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche, they seem to be gelling and getting off to a hot start right now. Even the Boston Bruins right now, and they had some issues of their own in regards to their lineup with players leaving due to retirement. They're getting contributions throughout their lineup. They're having that mentality. And I think he just wants to get that consistency from his team that has yet to show that even since he started coming in as the head coach.
Yeah, and you probably are going to see this a lot from teams that were, considered favorites coming into the season, right? Like all the teams that you mentioned, you probably on paper would have looked at them, maybe outside of Vegas, Boston, Colorado. They're all considered kind of teams that might have taken a step back this summer, might have drop down in terms of contention and Stanley Cup contender, ship where they rank here. But the teams that are supposed to be good, Toronto, Edmonton, Buffalo that we talked about, they've not been very good, right? Yeah. So, and even though they've won in some cases like Toronto, where they've gotten the 2 points, they almost didn't deserve to win a couple of those games. So it's like you have this sometimes with these teams that walk into the season going, yeah, we're pretty good. And then you don't play that way, where you have the teams that are like, yeah, we are good. We know we're good, but nobody thinks we're all that good anymore. Let's prove to them that we are. So they come together as a team and they play really well, right? Like Boston's a perfect example. I would have never thought, one, I didn't think they were going to be President's winners last year, the way that they just destroyed everybody. But I also thought they were going to take a huge step backwards this year. And they seem to find ways with certain players and rookies and whatever to just make it work. And so you don't know if that's the mentality in Toronto, right? Do they get too comfortable with who they are and how good they are and how dynamic their skill is? And they think, we could win 6-5, 5-4, 7-4. Like, we could win these games. And then they realize, that's not the best formula for doing this. I think that's what happened at Edmonton. They probably came out flat and lost 8-1, right? Like, it's not the way to go. You need to every game realize that you can be beaten if you don't play your best hockey in your 200-foot game. And Toronto has a bad habit of not doing that. They just, for whatever reason, one part of the game clicks and the other part doesn't. And, they got to get it all together. And I don't know if it's just a mentality thing or if it's immaturity thing or what, but they should be mature at this point. These guys have been through this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the star players right now, they're not little kids anymore. They've been through these moments before. They know what's expected of them, and they should be at their best. And I agree. This is something that it needs to click in and it needs to be consistent because, you want to go far. You got to show that in the regular season. I think they want to keep that going forward, make every single regular season kind of like a step towards the playoffs, which should be the case, but have that mentality and mindset from the very beginning and not just halfway through after the deadline. They want to have it right now.
You'd think they'd be tired of this too, right? Like even Mitch Marner said it in the media the other day when they were talking about Connor Bedard and how well he's handling all the questions that he gets. And Mitch Marner's first response was, well, you guys could be kind of hard on people. Okay, so if that's untrue, but like if that's what you think about the media, then why don't you just play your way out of having these questions asked to you, right? Like this is the 4th, 5th, 6th year for some of these guys where the same questions are being asked of this roster and this core over and over and over again. So you think, man, if this is what if you want to avoid this, don't play this way, right? Like come together, play a really solid game. Don't leave any questions about your effort level and what you're doing, and just play so that all the media is going to do is ask you about how well you came together as a team and how hard you worked, how physical you were, and how gritty the performance was. Like, just take those questions out of their hands, right? And play up to the point where you don't have to worry about whether or not the media is mean.
Yeah, I mean, history doesn't lie. Again, we've seen it time and time again. Moving on to the second part of our show. But before we do, once again, be sure to check out the Maple Leaf Substack from the Hockey Writers. Be sure to put your email into the link below, and you will be getting all the daily content from the Maple Leafs team delivered to your inbox every day. That includes from Jim, myself, and every other Maple Leaf writer that the Hockey Writers has to offer. Be sure to do that and have that read it with your morning coffee, breakfast, what have you. You will get it every single day. Moving on to the second part of our show, a little bit of some brighter news, especially considering where they were in the negotiation process at, let's say, the drafts, free agency. There seems to be a little bit more traction going with the Nylander and Maple Leafs contract negotiation. Just last week, I did an update piece on, how insiders are probably feeling a little bit more optimistic, where Darren Dreger said that Brad Treliving had an important face-to-face with Nylander, similar to that what he had with Matthews. Pierre LeBrun in the same segment said that there are positive vibes and everyone's on the same page. Earlier today, we could probably make this 3 for 3 for the TSN insiders, because Chris Johnson said on the Leaf Report podcast, in regards to the Nylander negotiation, that he gets a sense that Nylander won't sign, or let me rephrase that again. He says, I don't think there's any reason to think Nylander won't sign an extension in Toronto. There we go. Finally got that. He gives out, this is his quote unquote dirty secret. Leafs know he doesn't want to play anywhere else. What the Leafs could pay him over 8 years, and what another team, if he leaves on July 1st as a free agent, can pay him is not really all that different. So no matter what, if he signs in Toronto, if he signs elsewhere, there's really going to be no difference. And he says that there's possibly a 90% chance Nylander stays with the Maple Leafs. After I fumbled that a little bit there, Jim, what do you make of this possible progression given how everything is going right now?
I don't buy any of it until I see him sign.
Fair enough.
That's where I'm at,
enough.
because I'm actually the opposite of a lot of these people. Now, obviously they have information and sources and, details that I don't have. But to me, there's two things going on here. If this was going to get done and this was a given that he was not leaving Toronto, it'd be done now, right? It should be done already. Like, if everybody knows this, that he's not leaving, it's just a matter of whatever. And if Toronto's willing to pay what any other team is willing to pay, this should be done already, right? Like, there's no question about the fact that this should be done. My other concern is that the better he plays, which he's played fairly well, even in that 4-1 loss where he had that beauty pass to John Tavares, he's been maybe, arguably, outside of the 6 goals from Auston Matthews, he's been the best player. So the more he does this, the more other teams are going to look at him and go, what is going on in Toronto? Why is this not done yet? Do we need to make room to make a pitch for this guy this summer? And I think that could happen. So I don't know why this isn't done. If all of this is true, that he doesn't want to leave Toronto, they know he doesn't want to leave Toronto, they don't want him to leave Toronto. Like, if all of those things are true, this should be done. Like, there's just no reason that it wouldn't be. And if it isn't, the only reason I can think it's not done is because Toronto just doesn't want to pay him what he thinks he's worth. And so at some point, he's going to be like, yeah, I don't want to go, but I'm kind of getting pissed off by this thing. It's the Stamkos situation in Tampa, right? Where you're going, Stamkos knows he's a good player. He knows that he's been a loyal guy to Tampa this whole time. He wants to stay. He's told the team he doesn't want to go anywhere. He's kind of mad that they haven't figured it out yet. At what point, and we're all looking at Stamkos going, is he going to leave? Like, there's still some people like, no, he'll finish in Tampa. But there's others that are like, he's going to go, right? This is no way to treat this guy. He's going to leave. Well, when do you get to that line with Nylander? Like, that's the question I want to know, is at what point do you go from, everybody knows he's staying, everybody knows he doesn't want to go, we're all going to get this done. It's still not done. It's still not done. It's still not done. At some point, he's going to be like, why is this not done? Like, we should be finished. You should give me the money. I've proven it over and over and over again. Look at what I'm playing. Like, I'm worth $10 million. You all know it. And yes, they have the room. They can make it work by not signing Bertuzzi or Domi or Klingberg or Samson, whoever they choose to let go. They can make the room for him, but they sure don't look like they're gonna. So what's he want to do? Does he want to take $2 million less a season? Because that's maybe what it's looking like.
Yeah, no, and that's really fair too. I agree that if it was in the cards, it should have been done right now. But I wonder if what's going to happen, if it's going to be a 7 or 8 year deal. I think if it is going to be an 8-year deal, maybe Nylander would be willing to bring his asking price down, because usually in the sense that if you go a longer term, the AAV goes down, but if you're on a shorter term, the AAV goes up. So I think maybe if that's the case, if they're still trying to get into that 9.5 million ballpark, maybe sign him to that extra 8 year, and then maybe things will work out itself. again, I do agree that they would have the space. Cap is going up. You're going to have a number of free agents where you can allocate a little bit more money to Nylander. I do agree with that. But also I think the other sticking point too is that he gave his agent to negotiate during midseason, something that you really haven't heard of, which maybe kind of like pushes the narrative into the direction where maybe he does want to stay and get things done. But then again, like you said, if it hasn't been done already, why hasn't it gotten done? It should have been like, it kind of feels like a moot point at this point. But yeah, no, I totally agree where you're coming from. But there is like not necessarily evidence because it's all just like insider info. But it kind of feels like things are right in the middle right now where the needle isn't quite moving.
Well, the way that Chris Johnson phrases it, it's almost like the Leafs are leveraging the fact that Nylander doesn't want to go. Mm-hmm. And I agree. Like, he's making it open so he could sign during the season. That shows he would like to stay. I'd be shocked if the 8 years at $9 million hasn't already been thrown out there by Toronto. And if it hasn't, it's because they're lowballing him.
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's the reality of this, is if they believe that he's not going anywhere and they're going to call his bluff on it, they're lowballing him. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what's happening. So if that's the case, at what point does Nylander go, okay, fine, I'll just take it? Or seriously, stop lowballing me? Like, what is Nylander? Which guy is he? Because if it's me, I don't know if I'm that guy that'd be like, fine, I'll just take it because everybody knows I don't want to go. Like, I might be kind of mad. I might go, fine, I'll just check the market. If I can get my 10 or 11, I'll get it. Right? Like, mm-hmm. I'd probably explore that option. So yeah, I don't know. I think they're playing with fire here.
Yeah, that is definitely something that you don't want to do. But again, still plenty of time for things to work itself out. But, it seems like with just maybe a little bit of news, it seems like there's a little bit of hope. So I think that's what people want to hear. Moving on to our final talking point of the night. Obviously, there's going to be some talk about what to do with Fraser Minten. He's played in 3 games. He's still got 6 more games in that 9-game trial before they burn off a year of his entry-level contract. Based on what you've seen, obviously, he had a standout preseason. He earned that roster spot. He has kind of looked good at times during this 3 games, but also you start to see, the fact that he's still a teenager. He's still learning the game at the pro level. Has he done enough to try and earn something beyond that spot? And if not, if he does get sent down to junior, who is your ideal candidate to call up?
Well, I would send him down for sure. I wouldn't. There's a difference for me between looks good and looks capable and keep up. And I believe he's the second. I think he looks capable. I think he fits in the NHL. He can keep up with the NHL. I wouldn't say he looks good, right? He looks like he's not necessarily overwhelmed, but that he's not probably going to have the most productive of seasons. He'll be useful enough, but he's not going to be like, wow, it was such a good idea to keep him. And certainly not worth burning a year of his entry-level deal. So I would definitely send him down. We'll see. If he changes everybody's mind in the next 6 games, then he changes everybody's mind, and then you've got a great player in your hands. So he's still going to be a useful player, but is that what you want out of his first year, which is just, he kept up and he did okay? I don't think so. You want to keep this player under control as long as you possibly can, have him just dominate, and Guelph and all that other stuff, and then just kind of figure it out. But we talk about Nick Robertson. I'm not sold on Nick Robertson. Maybe he's the guy you call up. But I don't know that you keep him. If he's hot, then you look at it and you, okay, well, he's scoring for us. It's great. I just think there's too many question marks with him at the NHL level, injury related and his productivity and all that stuff. So I don't think he's the solution. He might be the guy that you call up if you just choose to move Minten down, but I don't know that he's your permanent long-term fix. So I don't know what the answer to that question would be, who I would put in there. Because Minten answered a lot of questions for you with Nylander at center and all those other things. So you would need somebody who could solve some of those problems. Otherwise, you're creating new holes. But so Robertson maybe gets the call up, but I'm just not sure he's the long-term solution.
Yeah, I agree with your assessment of Minten there. He has shown that he's able to keep up with the pace. It is quick, but he's learning as he goes, and he's keeping up with, he's keeping up on top of things. And that's what you wanted to see with his development. Again, could have had like maybe 2 goals himself in that game against the Hawks, where maybe he was just a little bit slow to get a reception, get the puck off. those are little things like he wasn't executing as well, but I still think, the promise is there for him. I agree. Sending him back to Kamloops is the best thing. Let him tear up the WHL for one last season. Then when he comes back, he'll already have that pro experience. Yes, it's 3 games, but it's something that he can take with him as a result. As for the call up, you still got to give Nick Robertson that chance. I mean, there's so much promise in him as that second round pick that you got from him. Still a player that can shoot the puck. He's very quick. He's aggressive on the forecheck, leading the Marlies in points right now with 5. Also, he's in that kind of like a 7-way tie for first in the AHL scoring, which is a good sign. But then again, if you're losing Minten, who is a center, are you going to bump Nylander down to that third line and call up Robertson and put him on the left wing and shift either Yarncroke or Domi or whoever is on the other side? He is a left wing. I'm not, if he's able to play the right side, great. But I think if you send down a center, I think your priority should be to call up one like a Bobby McMahon, a Pontus Holmberg, players that have had, stints in the NHL, especially Holmberg. He's got a lot of experience with, I believe, with, either 20 or 30 games that he's played in, especially last season. There are opportunities for something for them up the middle of the ice more than Nick Robertson, because I don't think you want to put a wing in the center spot and you'll be kind of trying to fill more spots. And not only that, do you want to bump David Camp up into the lineup and put Pontus Holmberg as your 4th center, or are you going to go Holmberg as your 3C and then Camp as your 4C? So I think they're going to be looking at a center to bring up. I would like Robertson to get a chance to see what he could still show maybe one last time before they make a final decision on him, if they got to trade him or move on from him. But yeah, the options are going to be endless, because there are a lot of standout players for the Marlies that they could use at their disposal if Minten gets sent down.
Yeah, and the question that we've talked about throughout this entire show is the defense good enough? And when you're talking about a third line center, even a fourth line center, you need them to be responsible defensively. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be a huge issue if you try to put a square peg into a round hole. Like if you're putting Nick Robertson or William Nylander, they're just not going to be able to do it. Like they're not going to be able to play. As the defense is already bad, right? They're just they're giving too many good looks, too many high danger scoring chances against. And you're trying to put a winger at the center position. It's just going to get worse. So you need somebody who is responsible enough to add to the, not add to the defensive issues, but kind of solve some of those defensive issues, even if they might not be the full solution you're looking for. Just somebody who helps that area a little bit, right? That's ideally what you want to put in that slot if you're going to move Minten out of there. So, and it's not like he's a 4th line center playing 6 minutes. He was playing 3rd line center role, right? And he was going to get some opportunities while they were giving him a look. So it's not like a small kind of tiny role where this player's barely playing. This is a guy who's being relied on to be a contributor. So whoever you call in that spot needs to be defensively responsible and can contribute.
I just came up with one more scenario. Maybe you move Domi to the center spot, and then you have Robertson on the right side, which could help out because he is on his offside. It could help for one-timers. Nice is on the left wing. So maybe you have that little bit more of an identity there where the speed is so evident. The ability to forecheck and be aggressive on the attack is going to be a common theme for all 3 of those players right there. And it gives a passing and shooting option between both Domi, Nyes, and Robertson right there, where it could be a little bit unpredictable for the opponent. But still too early to tell. Possible scenario. We'll see what plays out with Minten, but he does show that he could keep up. I just think even when I wrote about the piece where, he earned that spot, I still think sending him down before the 9 games is going to be the most ideal situation for his development.
Yeah, Domi might be interesting, but they might be feasted on them defensively, right? Yeah. And he takes terrible penalties. So if he's struggling, he's going to take a lot of calls. So it's a possibility for sure. I'm not sure if it helps you on your defensive side of things because he doesn't really play it. But, it'll be interesting to see what they do because I think they're going to have a tough choice here in about 5 games.
Absolutely. Again, they got the time to do it. It's still time for Minten to still show his worth. But that is all the time that we have for this episode of Maple Leafs Lounge. Once again, be sure to check out the Maple Leafs Substack. There's a link in the description below to sign up, and you can get all the daily Leafs content from our Maple Leafs writers over at the Hockey Writers into your inbox. For Jim Parsons, I am Peter Baracchini, and we will see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.